So Ray, I want you to introduce yourself and just a brief history of the character of Ray.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly correct. A brief history of the character of Ray, because I was like, I sent you that bio, and it's not. I mean, it's like it's not true. It's like even like I knocked it off in like 30 seconds after I realized you needed one, and but even while I'm typing it, I'm like, none of this really applies anymore. It's like a snapshot in time of the past of of a person who no longer exists. And then I was like, well, they need something, so I'll send this. And then later I was like, well, what if somebody reads this and thinks the thing they need to do is go study ascension or Agni yoga for 20 years? Now I've got the karmic responsibility of wasting 20 years of someone's life. But then I was thinking, you know, whatever experiences we have were perfect at the perfect time that we needed to have them to get us ready for awakening. So it's always good, but the universe is uniquely tailored. So trying to follow in someone else's path is like trying to put on someone else's tailor-made custom suit. It's probably not going to fit. So then I decided there's whatever I say is true and not true, and helpful and not helpful. So I don't guess it makes a difference. So I mean, my basic history is I was I've always been interested in spirituality. I've had lots of kind of mystical, what people would call mystical experiences. It's basically a Christian esoteric, but I wanted to like lay out right at the front that I see this as like a projection of consciousness, and the form that it takes is just going to be whatever's the most helpful to that person. So I don't really see it as like any kind of like proving or making a particular form like Christ over and above any other form. It just, the consciousness brings to you whatever you need, and all, whatever form it brings to anyone is going to be the perfect form for them. So I did a lot of meditation. I did spiritual groups and various things, and I wound up being basically guided by a series of miraculous events. It's like these highly improbable events, any one of which was 1,000,000 to 1 shot, and all of which needed to happen in order for me to wind up learning breathwork from the guy who invented it. Otherwise, I never would have found him. And so I wound up, it seemed that I had a knack for it. I wound up being a lead trainer at first, and then the executive director of Rebirth International, which was like his global organization. And I studied with him for like 8 years total, like 3 living in his house, 5 actually with him, and then 3 more on my own, but always, checking in with him. And breath work, that's like rebirthing breath work, transformational breath work, intuitive energy breathing. It's a form of breathing that gets Kundalini energy flowing through you on a pretty regular basis. And he always taught that if you're going to do this professionally, you need to give yourself a session once a day. And that's like the goal. And, he didn't even achieve that because life happens. But I would say that over the past, since 1993, I probably averaged 6 a week, pretty close to once a day. And some days I would do more than one. And well, to cut the intro short, and one of the, I work with people where they are, and so I might kind of like occasionally go off on a tangent about something that might be helpful to someone who isn't necessarily awake or ready to awake. Um, the thing about doing a session every day, what I realized, this is just to help people, when it's easy and enjoyable, discipline is easy. And in a weird kind of way, even when it's hard and difficult, discipline is easy because you get the instant gratification. Like you go to the gym and you power through all the reps you're supposed to do. You feel good afterwards. And even the weird way your muscles ache and burn feels good. So it can be easy to maintain discipline when it's difficult. But the hardest time to maintain discipline, I think, is when it's boring and tedious and nothing is happening. And you still do it every day. And what I realized later was I was giving myself sessions every day, and it was a lot of times it would be boring and tedious and it didn't seem like anything was happening. And that was preparing me for this session where I saw the unreality of the ego. And so I had that session, and I saw that the ego was a complete, like total illusion. And that was when the character array ended. And that really is how I see everything. It's like everything is unreal, and all of the people are characters. And I have a sense of just like everything is just going to be perfect. Everything works out. Everything, in spite of all that's going on with COVID and politics and all that, I have this inner knowing that it's just all going to be perfect. It's all going to work. I don't feel threatened or afraid or anymore. It's like you just feel totally safe, and it's from no longer identifying with the characters. The character was the one that was always like trying to make things work out and control everything and anticipate problems. And there's drawbacks. It's like I'm not so good at time anymore. I try to remember when something happened, and 2 years ago, 3, 5, 7. I don't really think. It's like it's almost like you have a good memory about things if you're constantly talking to yourself about them. Talking to yourself about the past. But if you stop talking to yourself, then you kind of just forget all that. But I haven't really noticed any kind of problem. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool.
For this apparent character, you know, I was meditating for quite a while, but the apparent awakening did not happen because of meditation. So there's this debate whether meditation or no meditation. What's your take on that one, Ray?
Yeah. Well, even like I said, the breathing that I did where nothing was happening probably was preparing me for the session where something appeared to happen. So I'll tell you what happened. Well, first of all, I get guidance, and I've learned to listen to it. And I had this. Well, so the guy who discovered it called it rebirthing breath work, and he felt like people who would change it just a little bit and then change the name and act like they never heard of him were not being loyal. And so I was like, I was his executive director, so I'm going to be loyal. So I called it rebirthing breath work. But then I got this strong intuitive feeling to change the name to sacred breath. And for the first time in a long time, I resisted my strong intuitive feeling because I was like, really loyal. But finally, I just gave in. Okay, I got to change it. And I changed the name, and I have no idea why. I'm like, for like a year. And I'm like guessing, why am I calling it sacred breath now? Because I noticed people were coming to me. Like I started seeing more people wanting to contact their guides or something. I thought, well, maybe that's why but all right. Then I get this intuitive feeling to like learn all you can about the pineal gland and the third eye and the chakra of the pineal gland. And so I go on the internet and I start reading, I'm going where I'm guided, and I'm like collecting just data. And I'm like, what does this mean? Why am I doing this? And then I'm at home, and there's a book I have in my library, and I read it a couple of times. It was okay. It wasn't like, the best book on breathwork ever written, but I got this feeling to pick the book up and to turn to it, and not to a page. I guess I had a physical feeling where in the book to open it to. And I opened it up, and my eyes went right to a paragraph that talked about breathwork in the pineal gland. And I read it, and it's like instantly, like the puzzle just put itself together, and I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. So I go into my rebirthing room, my healing room, and I start doing the breathing, and I added this insight that came to me from all the puzzle pieces coming together. And it was a power, it was built, I could tell it was going to be a powerful session. And when you do this, you have your eyes closed. And where I lived, I didn't lock any of the doors. And so I'm doing this with my eyes closed, and I feel someone touching my foot. And I was alone in the house. And so it was just, three thoughts instantly came to me. I thought, my wife has come home early and she's touching my foot to let me know she's there. And this has come home early from a trip to Europe. It wasn't like she came home early from work and it happened all the time. But I thought maybe she came back early and she's surprising me. Or I had a neighbor who always needed my help with like mechanical things around the house. So I'm thinking her plumbing is flooding and it's an emergency and she thinks I'm asleep. So she's trying to wake me up. And then the third thought was, there's a burglar in the house and he wants me to open my eyes so I can see his big gun and tell him where all my money is. So those are the three thoughts that run through my mind. So I open my eyes to see which one of the three. And there's an angel at my feet giving me like Reiki. And then there's another angel on the right praying with like eyes lifted up to heaven and saying something, like praying out loud. And so I'm like blown away. So first I look around the room to make sure I'm awake and not dreaming, because I was just checking that the room, there wasn't any weird dream going on, that the room looked the way it was supposed to look if I was in the room, and everything looked normal. So first thing I do is I ask the angel at my feet, are you doing Reiki? And he's like, it's you could call it that. It's an angelic form. It's more pure. And I was like, okay. And then I look at the other angel praying, and I couldn't understand a word she was saying. So I turned to the first angel to talk with, and I said, I don't understand a word she's saying. And he said, you understand her perfectly well. You're just pretending you can't because you're pretending to be from here. And I knew by here, he meant like this plane of existence. And then I said, okay, so what's your name? And he said, my name wouldn't mean anything to you. I'm one of a host of millions. And anyway, the archangel is in charge. You should be paying attention to her. And he looks to his right, my left. And up until now, I had only been aware of two angels. So when he does that, I look to the left, and there's Archangel Gabriel. And it was like an angel like the other two, but clearly like higher. And I knew it was Archangel Gabriel. And so getting back to what I was saying about how, even though I get things coming to me from the Christian tradition, I think it's just like whenever you're getting ready to make a move spiritually, I think consciousness sends you like somebody to hold your hand. If you're lucky, you get and so it's just going to be some form that it's going to be comforting to you. But it's really surprising that I got angels, because I'm not really a big angel person. In fact, after this experience, I had to go find out about Archangel Gabriel. So like I knew, like the stuff you pick up in Sunday school about the archangels, angels in general. In fact, so when I saw Archangel Gabriel, who was very clearly female, I'd always thought Archangel Gabriel was a man. And I think that's because, I had heard Gabriel, come blow your horn. And in my mind, horn playing is like something jazz musicians do. So I'm thinking, man. And so the first like really profound thought I had was, oh, right, Gabriel can be a girl's name too. That was like my big profound. So anyway, Archangel Gabriel became my breath worker for the session. She took over the session and gave me a session and made me breathe higher and harder than I ever had before. And then the next thing I know, my consciousness is my breath is in like a tube going from my heart out to the universe, and it's bouncing back and forth. And I think of it as like, how they make a laser where they put the light into the laser and it bounces back and forth. One end is 100% mirror, and the other end is only a partial mirror. And when it gets strong enough, it shoots out through the partial mirror. So my breath was bouncing back and forth, and then eventually it shot out when it got strong enough. And when it shot out, my consciousness went out with it. And I became one with all human beings everywhere, and not just now, present, and future, and other planets. And that like when that happened, it's like right about separation is not true, because there is no separation. But even then, the breath work, it kind of showed, that session showed me the ego is completely unreal. Come up, and I talk about it, it's like I'm driving my car and ego is riding shotgun in the passenger seat. And we're going through the desert, and suddenly there's a lake in the middle of the road, and the ego reaches in the back seat and pulls out a couple of buckets and offers me one and says, we better get to bailing. Looks like we're going to be here a while. But now that I know it's a mirage, it's not actually water in the road, it's just one of those desert mirages. I just politely, I decline. No, thanks. I don't need the bucket. Thanks anyway. And that kind of thing kept happening. And each time the ego got weaker and weaker. So until finally, one day I wake up and I'm looking at things in the backyard, stuff I'd looked at hundreds of times, and suddenly it hit me. Everything is just there. There's nobody looking at it. It's just the objects are there. They're being seen, but there's no one seeing them. So it was like, that was when like the ego kind of just gave up, I guess. So it got progressively weaker as a result of the session, but I can't say that the session actually, removed it. It was like a major turning point when I saw the unreality of it. But embodying that intellectual realization of the unreality of the ego took about 2 years. And in fact, the right after this oneness thing happened, the session, I was basically non-functional for like 2 months, and I had to ratchet it back just so I could, because you're talking to people and you can't tell the difference between them and yourself, and they're asking you questions and you can't comprehend why they are asking you a question when you're talking to yourself. So it was I had like goofy smile on my face for 2 months and couldn't, just basically was non-functional. So that happened too.
That's a wild, fascinating story, Ray. How do people take that? Like, how do people respond to that, when you start talking about angels and stuff?
I don't talk about it very often, and when I do, it seems like well, they don't run out of the room screaming, so I guess it's okay. Yeah, you know, well, that's now, as I am now, I'm just going to tell them my truth, and I really don't care. And,
Good for you.
And I guess if I guess you just create, if you don't care, you manifest people in your environment that can deal with it. And also, it's like, it's angels, but I don't want to make like a big Christian thing out of it, because I really think consciousness and so I didn't really finish. I mean, consciousness took the form of angels probably because somewhere in my childhood Sunday Bible school stuff was a comforting connection to angels, and which I didn't even remember, but it was done for, I think everything is just done for us to, the whole point of the universe is for us to experience being asleep, and then eventually for us to experience waking up.
Thank you for sharing. What is consciousness? How do you define consciousness, Ray?
Really, I think that there's like a contraction. So one of the things about my path with breath work and spirituality in general, like when breath work, you start out, you're working with negative core beliefs, and the idea is a negative core belief that you've made wrong gets suppressed, and then it creates an energy blockage in the body, and so you want to deal with that. And you start out like dealing with it on the level of words and thoughts, trying to identify the negative thought and then counteract it with an affirmation. But eventually I got to the point where I'm doing everything on an energetic level. It's like and then I would say that my spirituality became, are you flowing love or not? If not, find the block, remove it. And you don't even have to think in words anymore. And also we talk about in breath work, at least I do, how thoughts are hierarchical. People have like negative beliefs that are specific negatives, like you can't fight City Hall, but that's controlled by a more abstract thought, like you can't get what you want, which can be controlled by an even more abstract thought, like I can't get enough. And each abstract thought, it's like the abstract thought might, like you start out working with one specific thought, one specific negative, but then an abstract thought might control 3 or 4 specific negatives, and a higher level abstract thought might control 2 or 3 lower level abstract thoughts, which control each of them 2 or 3 or 4 specific negatives. So if you can get high enough up, you can start taking out negative thoughts 20 at a time instead of just 1 at a time. And actually, so that's what got me, the whole thing with the angels wasn't just like a random thing. When I was trained in breath work, it was all about like working with thoughts 1 at a time, and they would call it peeling the onion. And after a while, I got to like, well, how many layers does this onion have? How long is this going to take? Isn't there a way we can just strike at the heart of the ego, the root of the ego, in one fell swoop? And I was actually praying and meditating and making affirmations to be shown that, when all the stuff about the pineal land and the thing with the angels happened. It was a result of me looking for a way to stop peeling this damn onion one layer at a time. And so if you look at thoughts as becoming more and more abstract, and the more abstract a thought is, the more sub thoughts it controls. The root thought is the ego's thought, I am. The ego, like, its first thought is I am. That is the creation of duality. That is separation. I am, I mean, I am separate from the one. I am is I be, and to be is like to exist, to stand out, apart from. So it's the first thought of the ego, of I am. And then when the ego begins to think about itself, that's the creation of consciousness, which is like the first split in the mind. So I think that and as soon as you as soon as you have created duality and you see yourself as separate from all that is, now you're running everything through that egoic filter. So you're separate, so that means everybody else is separate. So you see a universe of separate objects. We perceive separate objects because we think we're separate. And so we have to create our consciousness creates that universe. And then in that universe, we fill it with characters, including ourselves. The character of Ray is the dream character created for the dream by the consciousness. And I think, and you can feel it, like it's like a physical, so you deal with the breath work is about finding contractions and blockages. And one of the things you find is the blockage, the contraction, that's the original source of ego. And it starts in the heart. It doesn't start in the mind. You can feel this contraction in the heart. And it's like a refusal to love. It's like not wanting to accept everything as it is with love, with unconditional love. And when you are willing, it's weird. It's like, as soon as you accept the dream with unconditional love and realize that it's all perfect, it's like you get prior to ego, prior to consciousness, you get to where everything, the absolute, that everything is simply arising out of. And what the Course in Miracles calls the nightmare of the ego becomes the happy dream of the Holy Spirit. And I guess it all comes from consciousness. It's all God, all the absolute. And you can think of it, it's important not to get too carried away with metaphors. Like people talk about dreaming, like the Course says you're asleep in heaven, dreaming of exile. Well, what kind of beds do they have in heaven? Is it a four-poster queen? Maybe a king-size California mattress? I mean, you're not really in a bed in heaven dreaming. You're like in heaven. But if you want to stick to the metaphor, if the ego's nightmare, where is it? It's in heaven. Everything in heaven is perfect. So the ego's nightmare is perfect. It's exactly what it needs to be. And when you stop fighting against it, and I don't mean like say, well, it's perfectly wonderful if kids are dying, but in the moment, you love it unconditionally and accept it. And then if you want to change or improve things, you do it from a much more positive beginning than from a negative place of anger and resentment. But it's amazing how it transforms the entire manifest universe if you simply realize that it is it is what it is. It couldn't be any different and than what it is, and really it's perfect for what it is.
Right. What does God mean to you? What is God?
Um, I like to, we're God. I mean, you are God. You created the cosmos. God is not, God is not like up there and we are down here. Like God is not some separate being. Um, it's hard to use the word God because as soon as you say God, that like the language gives the impression of duality of I'm here and God is over there. Everything is God. We are God. You are one with God. God is oneness. God is the absolute oneness, but there's no difference between the absolute oneness and the entity pretending to be Ray or pretending to be Emerson. But as soon as you say God, or do you believe in God? What does God mean to you? You're setting up a dualistic dichotomy between you and God. And then ultimately, what does it mean? If everything is God, including yourself, does it mean anything to talk about the existence of God? You're talking about just.
Does God have free will? Or what is free will?
Well, that's a good question. Like everything, when I said, no, when I had the time where I'm looking at things in my backyard and it suddenly hit me that there wasn't anybody looking. It was just the objects were there, but nobody was seeing them. But they were being seen. And when the ego doesn't exist anymore, then there's no one making choices, which means there is no free will. Which if you realize that everything is just life force energy flowing through and occasionally slowing down to be a form, it's like it could not be different than how it is. And in fact, if it's a dream, I guess the dream is going to be whatever the dreamer is going to dream. Unless you have a lucid dream, you very rarely can change things in your dream. So for the individual, when you realize there actually is no individual, then obviously there can't be free will because there's no individual to make choices. And then if you're one with God, then the question is, does God have free will? And my sense of it from when I'm in these places prior to all of this, because you want to think God has free will. He's an all-powerful deity, right? But if God is just perfection, doing what perfection does, so there's no, how can God have a choice when God only does what's perfect? To have a choice would imply that like God has to decide between perfect and maybe not quite 100% perfect, and you got your fingers crossed, God to make the right choice. And so like the whole concept of choice when you're dealing with the consciousness, just the absolute just expressing itself perfectly, falls apart. So if there's no choice, there's no free will. It's just everything is just. I mean, it might sound blasphemous or heretical, but you can think of God as just like a giant amoeba flowing through space-time, or even not even in space-time, but just kind of flowing perfectly through, doing everything perfectly, and there's no question of free will or choice. I mean, it looks like we have free will, but I mean, one of the things that I deal with people is about their guilt over past actions, and you have to point out to them, you did the highest, best you could do at that time with the knowledge you had and the person you were at that time, and you need to forgive yourself for that, because it was it was the best you could do at the time. And so in that sense, there's no free will for characters even. So if characters don't have free will, then God doesn't either, or the absolute, or us on another level.
Thank you so much. What is cause and effect karma or reincarnation?
Well, when when I was having this through the tube experience and became one with all people, it was past, present, and future, and I got the definite sense that time doesn't exist. That your present life, your past life, and your future life are really all happening at the same time. And I think it's just sort of we come into this realm, this level of existence, this realm, to experience duality. And I think we kind of we set ourselves up, like people, when you do this work that I do, you can see how people will bring in something from a past life, and they set up the physical circumstances of their birth to reinforce that thing they're bringing in from the past life, and they set up their early life experiences and whose parents they pick to further reinforce it, and it's all for the purpose of finally learning this lesson. So it's like it's like you're watching a movie, like you're going on YouTube and picking movies to watch, and you set it up. This lifetime, I'm going to watch this movie. This lifetime, I'm going to watch that movie. This lifetime, I'm going to watch this movie. And somewhere in there, you have picked the movie where the character wakes up. And so when you hit that movie, you get to wake up. So it's all, I mean, it's illusory. So cause and effect, and you're talking about a dream in a place where time doesn't really exist, and there really is no past, present, or future. It's just you set up these movies to watch. So how can there be karma? How can there be like reincarnation? Like I said, you might have, you have all these lives at the same time, and each one's watching a different movie. And on some level, you set all this up for the purpose of playing in duality, and at some level you pick one of your lives as the one where you watch the movie of Ray wakes up, and so it's like you're hallucinating a movie inside of a dream. So it looks like there's cause and effect, but that's a meaningless concept in terms of what hallucinating a movie inside of a dream. And reincarnation, not only are you doing all the lives at the same time, we tend to want to interpret reincarnation as a cause and effect relationship. I had a bad past life, so I got to pay for it this life. I was good in a past life, so I get rewarded in this life. But they're all done at the same time, you know, in eternity, which isn't really in an infinitely long amount of time. It's like there is no time, timelessness. So within timelessness, they're all happening simultaneously. So there really is no causal relation between the past life and the present life or a future life. So it's all just what is happening now, and are you flowing love or not? That and um, it's like it's almost just ridiculously simple.
Is there a dream of enlightenment, or is awakening an illusion?
I didn't catch the first
Oh,
part.
sorry, Ray. Is there a dream of enlightenment? Is awakening an illusion?
Is there a dream of enlightenment? Is awakening an illusion?
Yeah.
Well, it would seem it seems that awakening is like lucid dreaming. You awaken within the dream, and you're like, oh, it's a dream, but you keep dreaming. So it's like what's dreaming is the like this egoic sense of self that we create with our mind because we want to believe that we are separate from everybody else, everything else. And it's like it has to like its story is one of judgment and blame and finding fault with everything and everyone so that you can be um, superior and better than and separate from. And when that whole storytelling function of mind stops, you know, maybe if your body doesn't turn into a rainbow body of light and you know dematerialize like a Star Trek telepath, you know, fifth level of heaven or whatever, you continue to exist on the planet, and you continue to honor form, and you continue to, you know, it's like I still get flat tires, but it's just something that happens. It's not like a story where I have to be personally offended that a flat tire happened to me. So it's like you wake up within the dream continues, but now you're awake and aware that awake within the dream and aware that it is a dream. And like I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Like I said, you just feel totally perfectly safe, and you feel like everything's going to work out, and you feel like there's no turmoil. There's no like the endless drama of being involved with fighting against life. You're just like, oh, it's a dream. I'm not separate from anybody else. I'm one with everything. The everything that I'm one with is perfect unconditional love, and everything is flowing exactly the way it's supposed to. And maybe something else will happen later, but I don't need it to. But if it does, I'm open to it. And
Thank you. You answered that better than I did. When I got asked that question, I was like, I don't know. Um, to me, it's like winning the biggest lottery and winning nothing, and then no one winning it.